Доброго ранку всім присутнім. Дякую всім.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here on time, and thank you for your interest in this topic and developing this industry, because today we are here to discuss strategic resources of Ukraine. We'll discuss scenarios for development of the subsoil use. We'll talk about the extraction and processing of critically important materials. Can Ukrainian titanium, lithium, beryllium, and dozens of other minerals make Ukraine a key player in the market of the critical raw resources? Let's say the defense industry, the implants and pills on one hand and fighter jets on the other hand. I'm just giving you an example of one of the elements of titanium. Another example, the X-101 missile that struck Ahmedabad in this missile, about 70% of weight was made of titanium. The question is how much of Ukrainian titanium was used for this missile. Well, this question can be rhetorical or not. We will talk about that today. Our speakers will discuss it today at our event, at our stage. We'll talk not only about the subsoil resource of Ukraine and its geolocation and other matters. We will talk also about the state support of the strategic project that is needed. What are the gaps in the defense of the rights of investors, and what every player must do in this industry to develop the sector and satisfy the needs not only of Ukraine but the whole world and Europe through transparent legal mechanisms, protection of the investor rights, effective anti-corruption policy, and state support of the strategic projects. There is quite a few gaps, quite a few challenges, and we will talk about them today, and together we will develop specific decisions. We will discuss specific issues that we see and where we want to go to address them. Thank you very much for being here, for finding half of a day to join us, for speaking today, for sharing with us your opinions, and for discussing and developing decisions. I want to thank Your Excellency Richard Brink. I want to remind that the conference has been organized by the Foundation We Build Ukraine in cooperation with the National Association of Extractive Industries of Ukraine and the Media Holding, our media partner. I want to give the floor to the We Build Ukraine head of the supervisory board, Mr. Kubrakov. Good morning, friends, colleagues. I'm happy to welcome you. I want to thank also for being here, for making it on time, for letting us to start on time. I'll take a step back and say that, in fact, when we worked in the ministry, we started a joint project with Boston Consulting Group to develop the new economic strategy of Ukraine. And the sector that we are going to discuss today is one of the key industries of the economy that potentially is supposed to bring us back to the path of economic growth. And as we kind of agreed, we will move on by discussing different sectors, discussing that with all key stakeholders, including Verkhovna Rada and the state regulating authorities and so on. We will talk about 7 to 8 problems. If we address them, we will have like 70 to 80% of solution. And we know how it is done. We've seen it happening. Today we'll focus on subsoil. Certainly this sector is different from others. There have been few investments over the times of independence of Ukraine. There are not so many players here. Not so many investments have been made, but still the potential is there, and I hope we can untap it sooner or later, because I don't know what else should happen in the country so that it could happen eventually. The map is on the slide. I'm not going to give more details about that because our speakers will give them to you. Let's talk about challenges that we see in this industry. Certainly on the level of the state regulation, there are some challenges there, but there is global competition. This industry is kind of closed. If you want to learn something, it's not that easy to find information, but we can at least discuss these matters here all together, maybe find some solutions. Like in December, we had an event about defense industry, and normally our events end with collection of proposals when we identify key problems, and we suggest solutions that we try to coordinate with the market, with the state regulation authorities, and everyone supported this list of recommendations unanimously with defense industry. Hope that's going to happen today as well. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. Now we are going to listen to the longest speech. Laszlo Juhász, Managing Director of BCG, Central and Eastern Europe. He's going to be with us online, because when we talk about subsoil use and critical materials, this is one of the elements of key economic growth of Ukraine. And I hope that Laszlo will talk to us about the report about economic development. What was really powerful research by BCG. Mr. Laszlo, are you with us?
Good morning, we are ready.
Super.
You can start.
Thank you very much. Super. Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a big privilege for me to contribute to the opening of this conference. And I wanted to very shortly summarize some of the key observations and results of the study, which Mr. Kubrakov mentioned as well in his intro, and specifically zoom on the implications and the conclusions with respect to the subsoil use industry. First of all, my name is Laszlo Juhász. I am a senior partner at BCG, Boston Consulting Group. I am leading our company's operations in Central and Eastern Europe. And I was leading, together with some of my colleagues, this cooperation on the project which we have done last year. So what was this project very shortly, and then I'm moving to the scope of this current presentation. So last year we made a major effort which focused on the core question of how the Ukrainian economy in ideal world would look like in a post-war situation. So what will be the economic vision for the country? Now, we all know that this question is highly uncertain, given that nobody did know last year, and nobody knows at the moment, like when this post-war situation actually will come. We all know it will come, and hopefully sooner, but nobody knows the timing of this. But still, we wanted to make sure that even in the time of the tragic war, we think about the future economic scenarios and what will be the ideal economic scenario for the country. And this work we were doing not just with the resources of BCG. We obviously mobilized from our side the key experts of the major sectors from around the globe to bring real insight to the table. But we also did put a high emphasis on to do this work in a close cooperation, obviously with the teams of Mr. Kubrakov, with Unite, the NGO from Ukraine, and also we made interviews and close cooperation with NGOs, political and social entities, and private enterprises from Ukraine. I mean, some of you are in the room also in this presentation and this conference. And very importantly, we also made an intensive reach out to international companies and NGOs and tried to understand how they look at this question, like the future economic vision of Ukraine. And we were channeling in these inputs and then try to come up with a result which is not just theoretical, but also highly pragmatic and focusing on the real to-dos and the real kind of situations. Maybe just one more thing on the project and the study itself. So we were focusing on the economic structure and the economic sectors. Having said that, we also know that this whole strategy and vision can only be possibly realized if this has a regional kind of translation as well. So basically, we next to the national level strategy, we also defined the analysis of the status quo and also potential future scenarios for all the oblasts, all the regions of Ukraine, which is very important in my opinion. Now, when we think about the strategy for either a company or for a country also, then I think we have to answer two questions mainly. One is the question of where to play, and the other one is the question of how to win. The where to play basically means, what are the fields, what are the territories, what are the segments where a company really, can be successful long-term in a sustainable way. And in case of a country like Ukraine, this actually meant which are those sectors where Ukraine does have a sustainable competitive advantage long-term, which can be the pillars of the economy longer term. And then, of course, what are the other sectors which are potentially quite important, even short-term, longer-term, but where Ukraine does not have this deep proof of sustainable economic advantage. I mean, that's a very important prioritization we try to make in this project. The second question, the how to win, is more focusing on what are the enablers which a country should use in order to support the implementation of this sector strategies, like regulatory environment, like openness to foreign investors, support of local entities, rule of law, and this kind of, and the regional development, of course, very important. This kind of enablers, which we classify in this how to win category. And then how does it translate to the current conference and the presentation is obviously that when we were looking at the sectors, then it was very clear that mining, metallurgy, and in broader sense, subsoil use industry is clearly an area where Ukraine does have and should have and will have, in case of optimal development, will have sustainable economic advantage. And in that sense, this is an economy which should be strategic for the country as a result of our analysis. Now, let me show a couple of pages with focus on this sector specifically, very, very shortly. And obviously, this is a 1,000+ page material and study. And obviously, the constraints of this short intro speech doesn't allow that, we are going into deep or specifics here. I just wanted to come up with some frameworks, some maybe soul generation ideas, which then you can build later on in the conference today, in the panel discussions and the whole dialogue over this very important topic. So again, I hope you see my screen still, and I was paging to the first content page here. So basically, it's very obvious that in all analysis, this segment is important for Ukraine, even though Ukraine is not like a dominant player in this area globally, but within the economy of Ukraine, it's an important contributor. So 12% of the output, roughly 9-10% of the GDP, and 1/3 of the export before the war. These are the numbers which we were starting from, and this shows the importance of this field to the economy of Ukraine. Now, also it's common sense and a very well-known fact that Ukraine does have important reserves, and not just in one pillar or another pillar, but across the pillars, basically. So if we take ferrous materials, iron ore, if we take non-ferrous materials, alumina, nickel, copper, lithium, if we take the precious materials, energy materials, natural gas, lignite, coal, peat, if we take natural minerals, stones, and other categories, it's very clear that there is a reserve in Ukraine. And in some field, this reserve is, even though it's not maybe the biggest volumes globally, but still within the context of Ukraine, these are very important reserves and highly deployable reserves. So this gives a strong basis for the importance of this sector for the future economy of Ukraine. Now, I think we again all know, and nothing new in that when we think about the current situation and the current war front line, then a significant part of these resources is not accessible at the moment. This is a bigger share in case of metallic minerals and a smaller share in case of some other minerals, but still short term we have to live with this constraint that part of these reserves is not accessible, and that's obviously also a moving situation because this picture shows status of mid-year 2024. The front line, even though it's not moving big time, but still it's moving, and therefore this picture is dynamic, but it's an important constraint which we have to count with short term, and then hopefully will change in the longer term. I wanted to also show a bit of a lens how we were looking at some of these categories and mineral resources. So one perspective what we took was actually what is the expected growth of along these very different categories. That's one angle, that is the x-axis, and then what are the market imbalances or the expected market imbalances in the same category. So meaning, will there be an oversupply or over demand? Because that's obviously an important factor of how much the existing reserves of Ukraine can be deployed in an economic manner. And you can see that the picture is quite de-averaged and quite differentiated. Some categories like graphite, for example, do have a completely different position than some others, like some parts of the coal reserve, for example. So that is something which I think the future economic policymakers of Ukraine do have to have in mind, that the economic efficiency position of some of these reserves is quite different, and we have to apply a de-average lens when we think about the practical usability of these reserves for the future. Another important analysis obviously is the cost competitiveness, and also here just making very general statement. Often we have the stereotype that Ukraine is a lower cost production location, which generally might be true. I think this is again something which we have to de-average. We have to go deeper when we make these statements, because in some categories it is indeed true, like gray HBI landed cost to Europe, for example. This is an area where Ukraine is clearly cost competitive. In some other categories within iron, for example, it's less so. So I think when we try to understand the specific position of certain product categories, we have to be very clear about and very de-averaged about the effective cost efficiency position of Ukraine as is today, and then as we expect for the future. Now, another important factor here is obviously the foreign investments, the FDI, and the patterns of these FDIs, specifically for the mining and the metallurgy and adjacent economic sectors. So one important statement is, in general, mining and metals is a very important sphere of FDI globally. So this is one area where investments from large professional investors, to some extent also financial investors, is super important, generally and globally. Now, when we look at, again, pre-war situation of Ukraine, I think, as a matter of fact, Ukraine was able to attract a lower share of FDI in this space. Even if you compare with some of the smaller markets, I think, again, as a pre-war situation, Ukraine was attracting lower volumes in this space. And I think if Ukraine wants to really step up the game post-war in this important sector, then probably there is a need of a strategic thinking of where and how to attract more FDI into these fields. And then maybe an additional kind of lens how we often look into this topic of strategic focus on when we take mining and metallurgy as an example, like there are countries which are more in a passive facilitation role as a self-definition on one hand, and on the other side more focusing on the lower value add, like the mining part of the value chain. And there are some other countries which are activist investors, activist landscape shapers, activist strategists, and also do have a more like focus and more incentives to higher value add segments. And that's again something which I think it's worth to verse to think through for Ukraine for like the post-war economic strategy, like what is the ideal approach to actually maximize the economic value add of this very attractive sector for the country longer term. And then finally, and this is the page I want to close my short presentation and opening with. I think on the enabler side, there are some learnings which we were taking away from the analysis, but also from talking with the local and international companies. So we identified 6 critical factors to really support optimal strategy in this space. The first one is the government in any country, and also obviously in Ukraine, should be able to orchestrate its forces, its ministries, its different entities in a way that, you know, private companies, investors, international NGOs can have like a simple and focused and efficient dialogue with the given country. Like, for example, in the space of FDI, some countries do have a clear success globally because they are really implemented an institutional system which is simple to use, it's simple to navigate, simple to work with, and it's very focused on the dialogue with the international and local investors. Second one is pretty obvious. I don't want to take so much word on that. Stable regulatory framework, obviously, you know, rule of law, really, you know, make everything in the sense of the laws about the activities, the mining, the land access rights, and similar things. It's very important for investors, both local and international. And there is quite some work to do in that area for Ukraine post-war. I think it's very important to have a set of national champions in this space. I think that's something which will contribute to a better economic outcome in this space for Ukraine, higher value capture, as I also showed in the previous pages. I think 4 is attracting investment. I think here what we can say is that beyond the general and typical and common sense facts like easy processes, you know, rule of law and similars, I think in the area of mining there are some specific recommendations and best practices as well. So, for example, if the country is able, the big names of the sectors, the big names of the industry, that's always helpful, because the presence of the big names in the country is actually also creating an attractive invitation for other players in the same sectors, and it's also like a signal for the other international investors that it is possible to enter the country. It is possible to have a transparent and good cooperation with the government and the local country. That's very important. Second, obviously, logistics, infrastructure, transportation to eliminate the bottlenecks as fast as possible post-war is also very important. And then maybe third point, which I remember that investors mentioned, that accessibility to critical suppliers and vendors in the space, availability of those companies in the country is important, because then the whole ecosystem can develop and show up a more prosperous growth trajectory. Stability of relationship with business partners, again, quite obvious, quite important, especially along the supply chain. And then finally, the smart fiscal policy, which is, I mean, in a broader sense, like taxation, for example, like clarity and transparency of licensing, but also, for example, the availability of internationally acceptable geological data and surveys of the accessibility of this for investors. It's pretty important. So I think these are more again, a very high level, the preconditions, the enablers which we have seen, which are important to implement for Ukraine if the country really want to deploy this high potential and high feasibility area in this very important segment. So these were the thoughts I wanted to share with you. And again, I know it's very generic and high level, but within these constraints, I think we cannot go much deeper. But I hope that at least this was giving a bit of a, you know, ideas and thought provocation for the discussions later in the panels. And again, thank you very much for having me, and wish you a great conference today.
Mr. Laszlo, thank you. for strategy. Дякуємо, що слухали. І, можливо,
Thank you for listening. And now we switch to the first panel, mineral resources of Ukraine, raw materials. I would like to invite all the participants to the stage, and then we'll cooperate, interplay the timeline, 7 minutes for the introduction and the outline, the sensitive points that you would like to present, and then we'll have some interaction with the floor. And we are having a conversation. We are not reporting on Emre Karaahmetoglu, first deputy for the Ministry of Ecology. Alexander Buda was head of office, CEO Method West. Mr. Litnets, the Geological Service, Vladimir Holotov, Deputy CEO, Director of Welcome, Ukr Lithium Mining, another CEO, Mikhail Prohodko, Partner for Strategy and Transaction Leader in Mineral Resources Management from Ernst Young, and Angelika Levitska, Energy and Natural Resources Artsinger, head of department, as I understand. So the first question is to Olena, because the Ministry for Environment is there to make strategies. Your strategic vision is a reference point for everything else. What's the strategic vision? That's my general question to you for development of critical materials in Ukraine. Good morning, dear colleagues. I would like to say that presently this is our priority for the ministry. Despite all the complications and the hostilities, understanding the difficulty, the complications, we go on with the reform of the state geological service and legislation in that field. So we would like to say that indeed, this is very important, and development of mineral resources, mineral raw materials is one of the priorities. And we all know, and we all remember that at the end of last year, we adopted the National Program for Development of Raw Material Base in Ukraine, as it is called. For the first time, it introduced certain legislative differences, notion of raw materials critical and strategic, and we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and we have to develop the methodology for the glossary and the checklist of strategic and critical minerals. We are short of time. We have 6 months, and certain things should be done within 3 months. So presently, we are working on this with the State Geological Service. Well, the priority number 1 for reform of this sector is still maintaining balance between business interests, governmental interest, public interest in subsoil use with the environmental standards observed. This is the principal mission, but our strategic objective is for Ukraine to be included as a full member to raw material strategy of the EU till 2030. And development of the raw material base, we have head of the State Geological Service here with us, and he's in position to present it in more detail. But at the legislative level, I would like to say that presently we have achieved quite a lot. We have the Office of Subsoil User that we utilize, and we have the open list of the open data of strategic and critical materials, minerals, and we have developed many pieces of legislation currently in the pipeline for reconciliation with the central agencies as stakeholders. Many of you, as I understand, are interested in the situation with the methodology or technique that is being brought back to the state regulatory service and in the nearest future, by the end of next week, to be exact, we'll resubmit it to the agency and hence to the government. And that is of concern openness, things that we have developed to streamline. It's one of the priorities to streamline the procedure of getting permits, special permits, and developing the legislative initiative for the law on the production sharing agreement in its major part is about natural oil, gas and oil, but we can progress quite expediently as we expect, and we are very active. All the business associations are involved, helping us there. We are very grateful. Myself personally, I would like to say the ministry is open, and it seems to me that all the actors, stakeholders in this sector can feel it, and that we are there for you. We take heed of what you have to say, and the principal points very important for us are as follows. For the subsoil users as well as investors, which, as we expect, will join us and enter Ukraine, starting with the downstream and through to upstream, will develop this as a full cycle together. The priority for us, though, is for the case study, cases, files of the cases to be complete for the bidding and for the investors to be protected in terms of green resources and all the compliance and the permits for the excess time to get the resources produced to be as short as possible. In more detail, Oleg can brief you on that because it's his direct responsibility to develop this sector. Oleg, I will come back to you later with your permission. You mentioned your openness. One of the signs of this new openness is your presence here, but sometimes we take heed, as you said, I'm quoting, you have to always take heed, I suppose, but now let's ask Mr. Prohotka. But Alexander Vodovos, Metinvest, you have a lot of sensitive points, and the diplomatic missions present in Ukraine expect your answer. What can this iron ore sector or subsector offer for prospects and future investors, as we expect? I'm here as an exception. Metals are measured in kilos. Lithium and zinc is measured in tons. Millions of tons. That's what our business is about. And we could see the map of deposits of minerals in Ukraine. Our business is not about hundreds of $1 million, it's about billions. Should we expect any investor, not just any investors. Those should be the big ones, because it is very difficult to fathom. But something there as a subsoil mineral takes $1 billion. We lost Pokrovsk. To replace such a mine as the Pokrovsk mine, there are 3 shafts, and it takes $10 billion to replace. So we discuss Western Ukraine. We have the coal. That was the last one at Pokrovsk. Investors would like to develop the Luboml mine, 150 tons of the explored deposit. First, you need to spend $3 to $4 billion to get drilled into the ground. Is anybody prepared to invest that amount? Hypothetically, let's imagine the war is over. With the tariff volatility for transportation, tariff volatility for power supplies, tax policy volatility. Any investor would like to understand how in 5, 10, 20 years they'll be able to get their money back. And lastly, I was discussing it actually, that in order to get investments, we need some stability, some kind of stability. Is it the war, I wonder, or our own irregularities, let's put it that way? This is one of the examples. Another thing I would like to mention in this context, generally speaking, steelmaking is an industry that takes a lot of capital, and we had that graph on investments, remember? And BCG demonstrates that investments in production are national investments, because the Ukrainian business is export oriented. They sell abroad and they invest back home. So generally, on the average, up to $1 billion annual. There are many businesses to maintain this level, capable of doing that. So the first point is this: without some kind of predictable policy in terms of tariffs, in terms of taxes, you cannot expect anything. SMEs, it's very fashionable, it's a vogue to discuss small and medium enterprises. Let me remind you that this is just 20% in Ukraine. The rest of it is big industry. And Ukraine has been reliant on the heavy industry, not SMEs. Well, to invite international investors, we have to be predictable in that part. And what is actually needed to attract investments? Your answer, as I understand, is not to make our own mistakes. This is simple, seemingly simple, but this is about professionalism. We have some slogans like we'll do something about it, we'll get around it some way, but I don't think these are satisfactory answers. Olena mentioned the electronic office for a subsoil user. There was a hacker's attack on the 19th of December 2024. We are all were concerned, individuals and of course big companies. The web portal, the offices, the data are there. Nothing is lost. Can you assure us, reassure us? And in 2025, you have to fine-tune the office to finalize it. And what is remaining? This is my question and your references.
Thank you for this question. I want to thank the organizers first for the chance to take part in this conference. I really appreciate it. As to your question, I would like to assure you that the data that we read on the website of the State Subsoil Agency are secure. The accounts have not been compromised. You can take my word to the bank. As to the updates of the accounts, yes, we work to this objective. Actually, Q1 for us is a time to complete the testing. We are going to digitalize the geological data, and we are going to introduce that, fully deploy it, and that's going to be fully in line with the European standards. As to the registers that were damaged, well, our register was not damaged by the attack, but there was some sort of a delay on the side of the end beneficiaries. So the register didn't work, so we couldn't check data against the register. But right now, all the services are provided in due manner. If this answers your question, please say so. Yes, you did answer this question. We are going to come back to the register issue. I'll tell you how different authorities can respond, what kind of requests you can send to the Ministry of Justice. I want to ask you, how do you cooperate with the cyber defense authorities? Because we're going to talk about digitalization, and cyber defense is one of the key areas in this regard. But we'll talk later about it. And yes, I wanted to ask you about the challenges to the industry and yourself, your institution. Could you please put the presentation on? I want to share with you the key aspects and where we see our position in terms of legislation. For effective regulation, there are three regulatory documents that we, as the government, in particular State Subsoil Agency, is using. Firstly is the facility plan, in particular Chapter 13, managing critical materials. Second point, the approval and implementation of the roadmap for 2025-2026. You probably know that in 2021 we approved the Memorandum of Strategic Partnership between Ukraine and EU, and now we are discussing a lot this roadmap. I think this roadmap is going to be developed and approved soon on every level. And the main document for me is the law 4154/9. It's a national program on minerals and raw materials. We've never had a better program. So this is one of the drivers for the industry. My colleague will give you more details. I want to thank him for actual contribution and adoption of the law, and for being in touch with the President of Ukraine. So let's talk about facility plan. There are 6 indicators in the plan. First one is the adoption of the law. We had it done. Publication of report on verification of reserves to strategic minerals in Ukraine, publication of portfolio of investment project, and preparing and promoting the list of subsoil areas that are suggested, that are proposed through the mechanism of electronic auctions. launch international tenders. We talked about that. We also need to talk about the protection of foreign investments. Certainly the disputes, if any, they will be addressed in international courts, and that's why we need to think about this is a correct mechanism, the right thing to do. It's complicated, it's challenging, but we need to do that. And to do that with due transparency. Update of electronic account of subsoil users, digitalization of secondary geological information. So I talked a little bit about that already. The digital special permit, no, there's not going to be any problem with that. We started a pilot project with the EBRD and we completed it. Last week we had just another meeting with them and we've got a green light for the second stage now. So what are we going to do at this second stage? The information is going to be digitalized for the raw materials. So we and the whole Europe will focus on the areas that we voted on in the government, so 26 of them, kind of critical ones. And we'll introduce digital auctions so that international investors could check out all our geological reports, historic reports and materials. Not so much information has been digitalized yet, just over 100 areas that are planned to be auctioned. Still, there are a lot of areas that have not been digitalized. We need software for that, we need people for that, we need to train people to do it. So we have a head of a public agency speaking in the second panel discussion, and he'll give you more details. And the last indicated publication of report regarding the current legislation in the area of implementation of ESG reporting. Yeah, there are certain plans, quotas, and so on. I think we will complete all the tasks, measures that we plan for 2025 and implement this indicator. Yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to ask you a small question. You say that you need people, you need software, you need equipment, you need training. There is a small question. Do you have enough people who need to be trained, or are you talking about new people? Also, you say we are on the right track, but you say it with some sort of sadness in your voice. Am I correct? Well, in Europe, in European countries, for them, it's really a surprise that we have not done digitalization yet. And now we have to digitalize thousands of reports over just a year or 2 years. And when I say report, it's not only just a report, it's primary documents, secondary documents, lab results. So we need to digitalize this information first. And you can't do it overnight. When our expert here shows you an example of what you will understand what I mean. And when we are done with digitalization, we will prepare summaries, and then we will have the sufficient background and the base to take those areas to the auction. Because investors, they don't want to join a project without understanding what kind of mechanisms of protection is in place, investors will always look at different scenarios of the economic project. And the more reliable information an investor has, the more geological information the investor has, the better decision they can make. In the company I worked in, before we digitalized everything, before we, until we digitalized everything, until we showed everything to investor, only then the investors joined our project. Before that, it was not possible. As to memorandum and the roadmap, priority tasks as part of the memorandum, the roadmap. For me, there are three assignments, three measures. Develop the low-carbon strategy and the roadmap for Ukraine. The state subsoil agency is involved, but not so much as for the second measure, which is about digitalization, scanning of geological reports and creating the data room for investors. We would love to do that for the new asset, current assets, and privatized assets, but we will focus on those that are going to be auctioned. And the most critical thing for everyone, for all investors, in particular in Ukraine, is the verification and re-evaluation of the reserves, because we have some doubts about these numbers that we have in place. We have a person here with us who actually is on lead of these activities. The biggest problem for us, if we talk about UNFC and JORC, we need to, again, come back to the digitalization issue, because we need to understand that it starts first with digital information, with exploration activities, with testing, and then with the confirmation. And we have institutions, European institutions, that help us, EBRD in particular. I think we're going to have a new meeting in February, and I hope that this program on digitalization will be revived and back on track. As to the mineral and raw materials program, as I said, we have a colleague who will talk to you in detail in the second panel. I'll just talk a little bit about four aspects. First one is transparent rules, where we need to determine strategic critical minerals and so on. Another area is encouraging investors to join the projects and simplify the access to information and deepen international cooperation. And for that, actually, we need more meetings of the kinds we are having today, the more meetings that take place in Davos and Switzerland. And I hope this year we will see a lot of meetings about the critical raw materials, because we have already a plan on how to implement our program. Institutional cooperation with EU, you probably know all these companies and European partners. I want to thank them actually for the support. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm prepared to answer them. Thank you, Oleg. Yeah, we will give the floor to Volodymyr Holovatenko. He is Deputy CEO of Beholder. Certainly we can talk for hours, but I want to ask you a general question. If we talk about critical materials, what are the investment obstacles, barriers that we have in place today, and what are the key problems in the industry we're discussing today? Thank you, and thank you to the Gennadis for inviting me. I want to take a step backwards. I want still to comment a little bit the previous speeches. Certainly last year for the first time ever, we started creating a policy on subsoil use. Our MPs will give you more details later, but we need to understand the challenges we're facing here. Define what we mean when we say critical raw materials, strategic, and so on. This is the first step, terminology. But then we need to create specific criteria, then put them into a manual. We need to carry out the actual review, and the global trends show that those reviews or strategic or critical raw materials were conducted every 10 years, then every 7 years, then every 5 years in the EU. Today, they are reviewed every 3 years. And I forecast that soon it's going to be every year. The US and the EU started this policy a long time ago. We are lagging behind. But still we understand at least what to do next. So it's okay, and we're on the right track. Answering your question, I need to keep my speech short, only 7 minutes. When I talk about the investment obstacles, barriers, we need to understand that this is something that comes from the state regulation. State regulation, we know how to change it. We know how to shape new one. It's not a problem. The problem is that we started real fast. The speed was quite fast. I would talk here about two areas. We can talk about state regulation and the obstacles that an investor comes across before he enters the market. So when he goes through these permission procedures before the beginning of project. And there are investment barriers that investor comes across when he already got the license, when the investor has all permits in hands, and he's supposed to take some steps. So talking about the first area, let me tell you exactly what I mean. You probably know that better. I want to second on the second area. But yeah, let's talk about that. The business process. The first element is everything related to geological information. And yeah, we know that indeed we have the fantastic process at the moment, and they work fine, but not all geological information is concentrated in this unified center. Maybe not all piece of information will be digitalized ever, and there is a lot of geological information is outdated because it is on the carriers information that are outdated. Also, if we talk about critical minerals, so this information is outdated. The drilling took place dozens of years ago. After that, nothing was invested into the development. And we need to renew this process. And I know that the draft law suggests some tools for that. Yet still, these three elements must be digitalized, and they must be available on this first stage that investor has to pass. Yet we need to understand that even when it is over, those reserves will be approved according to Soviet standards. My colleague here says that not everyone likes it, but the international financial institutions, it's not that they like it or not, they just don't count these results because there is a Crisco template in the whole world with 11 standards in it. Or Canadian one, it's more related to the solid mineral. So there's a Crisco template. The whole world has it now. It has really clear templates, and anyone can take them and use.
Look, my company, the company I'm currently with, is facing such challenges. We have to develop the deposit. I have to explore, re-explore hydrogeologists, geophysicists, and other drillers with the samples to be produced for lab tests, and I have to defend this protocol with the State Committee on Resources. I cannot do that without the protocol because otherwise I have no special permit and I cannot start developing my field. This is mandatory, but this is not helping me. I'm wasting my time mostly and money, of course. In parallel, I have to undergo this procedure where I'm supposed to make slightly different samples with international labs, with international standards for the lab tests, which are compulsory for the CPR. Without CPR, competent personal I do that twice, the same thing twice. I would like to do it just once with the State Committee on Reserves with the resource adopted with the KRISKA template. The sleeping licenses, the sleepers, I can explain this notion to those concerned and curious. Now the access to the market with the production sharing agreement license for the government, it would be much more honest to offer a choice to businesses as far as the toolkit goes. You can auction your plot or you do the production sharing part. It's a normal practice in my book. Moreover, I think the lots to be presented at the auctions or the lots that will be prepared for the production sharing agreement competitions, we should not switch to that. They should be equipped with the land and the environmental impact assessment. It is not available, but it does not mean necessarily that it is not possible. It is. The powering challenges my colleague discussed at length. Let me instead draw attention to the regulatory investment barriers for the secondary entrance to this market. We should not reinvent the wheel. In Ukraine, presently, we have the best possible laws, not necessarily institutionalized, but this is being done and will be done, I'm sure. What I mean is that this law on investment into economy, we call it considerable investment, the industrial park law and the law on the mechanisms to stimulate financially export activities. I call it the mandatory triangle. The toolkit shared by the three laws is the best. Grace period for the company impacts, income tax, this is powering, and this is for the industrial parks. So this is financial risk insurance, that is the export and credit agency being introduced. Everything, but this everything does not work for our field, for our realm. It's not my doing, you know. The laws were made by somebody else, but I would like the production sector, industrial production sector to be included. But we are excluded. If we take the law on risk finance, there is a special Article 7 or 9, doesn't matter, but there are some exceptions, and I'm on the list of the exceptions. Not there. And I'm not prepared to explain why, but these are the challenges exactly that could have been instead a very powerful impetus. And these are the most exciting barriers, the most curious barriers. And if we focus on that, some of them can suffer clustering, some cannot, but the roadmap should be there to remove that forever. All the sector will be giving us a standing ovation. One speaker, barriers. We've heard the notion of barriers on many occasions already, and we are discussing Putin-Trump's talks. Zelensky's office has announced that they are getting ready. But in September, there was this meeting between President Zelensky and then Mr. Trump, not yet president. So, September 2024, Director for Strategic Development, the Ukraine lithium mining. We have him on the screen. Dennis, thank you for joining us online. You will be referring to geopolitics, I'm sure. Lithium is a strategic raw material, without any doubt. Perhaps you should follow the steps of Volodymyr, discuss the legal issues. Let me respond to some remarks made by my colleagues before me. It is a very pleasant thing to be heard from the ministry, the DSK regime being lifted. This is one of the problems, of the challenges that we should mention when we deal with some talks with the investors, prospects, and so forth. We can say, guys, you are offering investments in Ukraine into some location, but you cannot disclose the key information on the project. We have corporate procedures. We cannot waste our time even on the discussion if you cannot disclose the key information. That heading should be removed. This confidentiality, a confidentiality stamp should be removed, which is called DSK for internal use only. And this is going to be much more effective than the 3 previous years. They highlighted the problem but did nothing about it to solve it. So we also have to take off the pink glasses. We need transparent policy, and that reminds me, if we discuss geopolitics in particular, we should discuss different countries, different jurisdictions promoting their own competitive advantages. For example, when we discuss predictable policy, we have this example of Argentina, and what they did was this financial stability certificate. When some big foreign investors invested into critical raw materials in Argentina, they signed with the government, with the state, this kind of certificate, financial stability certificate for 30 or 50 years, with the fixed rules of the game. And our production sharing agreement, as far as I know, it can be also be based on the British law. It can be an analog, regarded as such, because without predictable and transparent rules of the game, no serious investor is going to enter the market. I agree with Alexander that it is for the big ones, and the big ones cannot do that without some predictable rules offered to them. Now about geopolitics. Let me say that presently it is very important for such projects as ours. So, well, I would like to mention some interactive things with the EU. But before I do that, I would like to share my presentation for a couple of minutes to discuss the project itself. Or should I share my screen? What do you say? You share. Okay. Well, we have 2 more speakers. Get ready with the questions. We have 20 minutes for this panel left because we started later than expected. So can you see my screen? We are trying to do something technically, but keep going and we will try sharing. So we have a special permit on production Polohiv lithium deposit field. This is the only special permit issued in Ukraine so far. We did it in 2020, and I understand my colleague who discussed this double burden. We did the work under the international standard that is acceptable and comprehensive for the investors. Our project is big and aggressive. It's 15 years the life of mine, and after having equipped a mine and enrichment facility for 15 years, you can produce. About the produce, here's the chain. We mine the ore. This is a special type tetalite ore. This is a very useful mineral containing lithium. We make concentrate out of it. From it, this is what is in our plans, and we have done the pre-feasibility study on that one. And the third step there is a much more complicated. This is lithium chemicals production. We are supposed to produce carbonate, lithium carbonate, and this is a different kind of story. Our field, if I compare it with lithium fields in the EU, because those are the benchmarks that we have to look on. We are top 3 in Europe. One of the top 3 in Europe should raise some interest in investors. The economy of production is supported with a pre-feasibility study done in 2024, engaging international consulting companies of the top 4, trusted by all the international investors. And presently we have this very important thing on our hands. 1.5 years ago, we applied for the strategic project status from the European Commission under the Critical Raw Materials Act, not just the project in the territory of the EU, but also the projects in the territory of the countries which are friendly as partners of the EU and can supply their produce to the EU. They had the opportunity to make such an application. We did, and in 2 or 3 months we can expect some outcome. Well, that's about the project. That's it, and I'm prepared to answer your questions if you have any. We should hear from all the keynote speakers, but you're staying on the call, right? We are discussing protection of investors, and Ernst & Young is a company knowledgeable of this. They will share their conclusions with us. Not all the 10 challenges. I'm addressing Mikhailo, the challenges the sector is facing, but we would like to have an investor profile, how we should best enter the market and how to attract big business. Thank you very much for the question. I think it is very important in the context of this discussion. So let me divide my answer into two parts. First, the sector and the international investors available, they can comment on this already, and how we are seen from the outside. And the second part, what we can do, business and government alike, to improve the situation somehow. Let me start saying that it is obvious that there is this competition for the projects, for the capital, and accordingly, we're not unique as a country offering, speaking of critical materials, something that is not available. They can choose. There is one thing that is called economic attractiveness. It's difficult to face. We have an active hostilities on our hands. So this is not the topic of this discussion, but the sectoral aspect I would like to focus on for us to understand how we can be on the priority list with the international companies. Our global sectoral team annually does surveys, about 350 respondents, CEOs of companies from the mining sector, and we are discussing the first step of attracting investment in mining. As such, processing as another matter we have to produce first. So the point of that survey was to ask the question about top 10 risks for the companies, the way they see that risks and opportunities for 2025. I'm not dwelling upon this in much detail. It's available for your perusal, but let me discuss some conclusions from this. The first position in this sector is capital. And nobody has any questions as to the prospects of development of the demand, prospects for demand. And the BCG colleagues mentioned that there are rates of growth, but we will need that material. There is no doubt about that. But in a short-term perspective, there are several factors. Pricing of the product. The prices have gone down. The peak is already behind us now. The prices are down. In nickel, it's clear there is this surplus from Indonesia in terms of supply and less demand on the part of China. And lithium, the same situation. We are down to the 2022 level for 3 to 5 years. We do not expect any raise, considerable raise. And we are in this competition that is not as attractive as a couple of years ago. On the other hand, the capital for the sector is limited in all the world. Capital is much more expensive than it used to be. And with this new competition, new situation, they have to downsize their investments. The big EBML, the biggest supplier of lithium, next year will decrease it by 2 times, and they previously did it for 20% of what they had. And the same goes for the rest of the competition, the rest of the companies, the investors. Approached by the companies in terms of capital management efficiency and decision-making discipline. What does it mean in terms of expected actions? Perhaps you cannot see clearly, but for 12 months to come, 3/3 of the companies are talking about leaving the project IPO or unbundling of their businesses. That means that the capital is not sufficient. M&A and strategic partnerships are reviewed, but on a smaller scale. And in the focus, we have the projects which are already at the operational phase, not the green field, not the ones getting off the ground, geopolitical and regulatory issues.
Certainly today, when there is increasingly more uncertainty in the whole world, it is hard to do some planning, and countries behave differently. Some countries, they develop additional constraints, like some of them set requirements as to the supply of materials from friendly countries. Some of the countries set some restraints in terms of processing. Some of the countries increase the taxes or require the government to have the control in stock, just like Chile or Mexico do. At the same time, in the same world, there are countries that set another objective. They set the objective to be self-sufficient in terms of the critical materials, both inside the country and outside the country, and they are prepared to invest into self-sufficiency, like Japan. Japan is prepared to cover up to 50% of new investment projects if they provide supplies of critical materials, or Saudi Arabia provides additional $200 million for development. That's kind of governmental investments to increase the reserves and supply materials to the country. Are there things that the businesses expect from the governments, those that encourage FDI? That everything actually that we talked about today, that simplification of barriers, of permissions or getting licenses, or reducing the time taken for that, or changes to tax approaches to encourage investments. They insist that if there are taxes at the very beginning, that's additional burden for the project. The taxes need to be imposed a bit later. You can see that on the screen now. The direct subsidies, it's the action that is expected the least by businesses. So the so-called environment, it's much more important than some incentives, because everyone understands that's going to be limited. So to wrap it up, as a result, the companies have to manage these risks and find the ways to minimize them, but at the same time they are looking for new opportunities to change the regulatory environment, because there are countries that offer new opportunities and they are more taken into account. The next two risks, well, or rather focus areas, that's reserve depletion and new projects. These are totally different issues that we didn't cover in the previous study, and I think it's logical that it comes from the point number one, which is restricted capital, limited capital. On the one hand, the companies are very much concerned that the reserves are going down because of two reasons. The old reserves deplete the resources, but on the other hand, the investment new ones were insufficient over the past times. And when we talk about new wells, new drilling, we have the statistics about the new discoveries. And we can say that over the past 10 years, the number of new discoveries is significantly less than the number of discoveries over the previous 10 years. But when we talk about new projects, there is another important factor in terms of the investment assessment. This is the time taken to reach the proper operational activity. Now it is 18 years. In 2010 it was 12 years. And there are two major reasons. Regulatory environment that is getting tougher, harsher, and the preparation is different. Now ESG, that is issue number one for preparation of project, for communication with communities. On the other hand, the operating technical risks need to be assessed from the point of view of economic efficiency, because investors want normal cash flow and probability levels of success. So we can, in summary, say that most companies in the world believe that critical materials or strategic materials, as they call them, has a potential growth point, and they are prepared to invest. But in the short term, given the capital limitations and the price caps, the investors really analyze the projects with better quality. The requirements to projects are now much higher. Second point, given the higher geopolitical risks and regulatory risks, the companies are very much interested in starting partnerships with local companies for the project that have already been prepared. And actually, that's what we need. And then, what do we need to do? It was easier for me to comment on the first part of the research. This research was not for Ukraine. That was a research of companies all over the world. But you're talking about Ukraine, we need to say that the companies already represented in Ukraine, if they're interested in this sector, can be this growth driver. And when we talk about new projects, new auctions, I believe that the companies that are already represented in Ukraine, they can start investments into purchase of licenses or all the explorations, evaluation of the reserves, preparation of all technical infrastructural issues. And they will also go to international investors, engage national experts, and so on. But at the same time, it's important to underline that our businesses must be prepared for that in terms of the corporate management, corporate governance, their values and prices. What the government can do, there are three main points. Point number one is strategy. It's important that the national program for the development of the mineral and raw materials has been developed. There are midterm goals established, but those goals need to be implemented, at least in key areas. Second point is actually what we're going to discuss at the second panel discussion. That's simplification. Simplification of processes so that the project could be implemented easier. And the third point, the government needs to understand how to support the sector. We are being aggressive in our position because we want to make more money. That's one thing. Or our objective is to engage more investments, raise more money, and get more added value. Then, in this case, we need to look at different players. Certainly, resources are limited, but we need to understand what are the steps that we need to take to encourage this type of investment, to raise them. And Kiev School of Economics, when we discussed the facility plan last year, we saw that some of these initiatives were already prepared by companies, and they were already offered to stakeholders. Thank you for your attention. Oh, thank you, Mikhailo. You shared with us the study that would be interesting for the whole world, for international companies. But Ms. Angelitska from the company Eisinger, she is going to talk about a company that Ukrainian companies that want to go outside. And I love that kind of speakers. You understand what's going on in the whole world in Ukraine. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you for this intro. Thank you for the invitation.
Also. Я буду презентувати українською мовою. Дійсно, буду говорити про страхи ринку.
Yes, I'm going to do my presentation in Ukrainian. I'm going to talk about the threats that we see in the market. We are the company that prepares analytical materials in terms of the development of necessary legislation for the for Ukraine to join EU. So this slide is about official screening of the Ukraine legislation, what we need to implement in the mining context. 550, that's impressive. The number of pieces of legislation in energy, mining, and environment, these are the three areas. And unfortunately, we didn't receive good scores during the previous periods, but our colleagues in the government did their homework to improve this course. But what does it mean for our industries? What kind of threats do we see here? Well, the threat is that we don't know what's going to happen, because the Ukrainian market in terms of the subsoil use, the biggest comment is sounds like that. Please give us a roadmap for annexation to the EU for the next 5 years. They talk to ministries, to different stakeholders, and no one has this consolidated information. When my colleagues say that the international investors are looking for predictability, do you think that local investors do not? Well, we do. We are in the turbulence zone. This is a terrible state. There is a war going on. We don't know when it's going to end. So the horizon of planning is very much unclear, vague. But on the other hand, we are going towards Europe. We're integrating into new legislation that we don't know. And sometimes it strongly contradicts our legislation and our national rules. So the first fear that the market has is uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen in terms of reintegration legislation for the mining industry. So if you, dear colleagues, could articulate it better to the market, that would be fantastic. That's just a favor I'm asking for. Second point, when we talk about some of the colleagues say we are talking different language with our international investors because the classifications are different. Indeed, when we talk about, we talk to international experts and send them translation of our classification, they say, hold on, according to our classification, what kind of mineral do you mean? And what kind of technology do you mean here? Indeed, we are still speaking different languages with Europe. So the second fear and the requirement of the market is to bring our classifications in line with the European ones. That's going to be of huge help for our investments, our international investment, and the FDI. Investors want to see the demining act in Ukraine. This is a general practice. Second point, the single window governance system. How many agencies do you have to work with today? Well, there are at least 5 of them, right? Key ones. That's not be the case. There should be a single window principle. Point number 4, increased environmental responsibility. We are out of the trend, and local investors are scared away by it, but this is a requirement of the global market. Everyone has said it, and this trend continues, and we need to be in line with it. As to the Critical Materials, Critical Raw Materials Act, if finally, I said we need to not only to make the classification, but to show the percentage of critical raw materials that is accessible for investors. This is the framework that the investors absolutely need. I hope that our government hears me saying it right now. What are the fears that scare away every subsoil use? One of them is called the Emerald Network. I see almost everyone is nodding. This is a nice phrase, isn't it? For you, if you don't know it, this is a special regulation of the EU as to the natural resource. If the Emerald Network overlaps with the section where you wanted to use, you can't possibly use it for subsoil extraction, full stop. Why? Do we need to understand? Because we as a country must expand the area. Today we have 10% of the area of Ukraine that's under the Emerald Network. We need to bring it up to 18. And that actually scares investors away. Because right now on the net, on our map, we have already this network. You probably know about it, and I hope that I am wrong, and I hope that you will be happy if I'm wrong, that we need to do it. But still, with the legislation that has not been implemented yet, still there are already disputes related to Emerald Network, and the case law is absolutely different here. The next fear related to the subsoil use is the ESG, of course. When it is under the directives of the EU, everyone looked at the central office and said that, well, it's going to be a while until we fully adopt it and so on. But the ESG trend is up and running in Ukraine. And now in Ukraine we have the European reports that correlates with ESG. And in some aspect it doesn't. We need to have our legislation appropriately aligned. What does the market expect? The market understands that it needs to report, but it needs to accumulate information for reporting. So we need to understand what kind of standard of ESG we are going to have in Ukraine, because we have the basic legislation now, but it provides for some gap of difference. So we either explain to the market that we are going to fully in line with European ESG, or we are going to have some gaps in particular areas. As to the timeline, you see the from the 1st of January 2025, it works for big companies. Starting from next year, that's going to be relevant for medium-sized and small companies too. Waste management. Extractive industry waste management. Question is, what's going to be the final version of the of our document? Because there are some gaps here as well. Why is it important? Because if we talk about waste, Ukraine has a very interesting situation with licenses, with permits. Statistically, about 70% of the extractive industry waste that that waste accounts for 70% of all waste that's generated in Ukraine, and we all. Yeah. Let's read the legislation. If I maybe mentioned the wrong number of resolution, we can check it out. I will correct it. We need to clearly regulate the waste in Ukraine. We have some problems here. We all know about them, and there is a problem with the market related to that. That's one thing. The other thing, we want to see how this law is going to be implemented in practical, practical work, actually. So it's not even the law that is important here, but the regulations that are going to be detailing the law. The problems. If Ukraine takes responsibilities in terms of the European integration as a country, takes financial obligation, then the question is, if the market is going to be responsible for that, what are the regulatory mechanisms that would be placed? Yes, facility agreement is there, but we need more details. Complications related to the war. Yeah, actually everything that could have been simplified has been simplified. The public hearing online, still some problems are still in place, and we need to remove them. There are some problems that need to be removed. The special standards of Ukraine legislation that are effective during the martial law and implementation of European legislation, that's another problem. Still, there is no correlation. because Ukraine took some obligations and Ukraine is implementing those obligations. But on the other hand, we have some preferences for the martial law and some other type of regulation, and we need to regulate it with the European partners. The implementation of the transitional requirements regulation, that's important. The whole market needs to see the whole package that's going to be approved. I already mentioned it, not only the law, but the regulatory statements, pieces of regulation, a second relation that's important here.
Different practices in terms of waste management, and we can see such related practices. Another challenge that we experienced recently, we implement with the lengthy procedure. Well, in the EU, they managed to change before we implement the previous version of the directives. That means that the information is not updated enough. And construction materials regulation 315 as in one example. Thank you very much for your attention. I am ready for discussion. I'm not blaming, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but expect some active feedback. Thank you. Angelica. We have 5 to 7 minutes before the coffee break for some kind of discussion. Yes, let me correct the date. This resolution 303, which is presently effective, the moratorium on inspection has not been lifted, and the state environmental inspection, well, the regulation was brought into compliance with the legislation, which in turn had some amendments for the waste management and understanding of the body of legislation in general. This is one thing. The inspections have been conducted, being conducted under Resolution 303. And for the Emerald network, for all the market, it is necessary to adopt and implement this very piece of legislation pertaining to Emerald network. This lack of understanding of the way to manage this network actually keeps the market in this kind of anxiety and uncertainty. And this is the apprehension we all experience, but there is nothing difficult there. This is management of the Emerald network. This is there are 3 annexes. Each annex has its own conditionalities. We shouldn't be afraid. Just read through the directive carefully so that we understand what to expect and how to proceed. And when we have this regulated for all of you and your businesses, it will become much clearer, because with uncertainty we have no rules of the game and they cannot proceed and progress. As soon as we have them, we'll have to stick to them. And I'm just calling upon you, let's sit at the same table and start developing some guidelines, and we should adopt this law on the Emerald network to make our lives much more comfortable as far as the international commitments are concerned. For the talks were since 2022, we have adopted some gaze periods for the procedure, but we have to come back to this for this kind of agreement. There are special conditions for specific activities, but about this OVD, and it's not clear what is meant by OVD, but well, we should do that, and we have to discuss it. The environmental impact assessment, and this is EIA, and that keeps us in the certain certainty that we won't be exposed, and again, this is done once, and this is part of the investment case study for all the investors. You should understand where these facility is, different territories under protection, heritage that is getting much more important with directive, the implementation demanded by the EU. And in that very directive, we have the special procedure for EIA. And if we evaluate the risks at the primary stage, is it some preliminary procedure or some kind of toolkit offered? We don't know yet, but it's just logical, it should be there. And Alexander, you wanted, and Volodymyr. Well, I wanted to recommend, there is another very important factor, and this is our legislation. Our colleagues mentioned this main direction. This is approximation, basically, as far as the EU law goes. There are 6 clusters, and we do it stage by stage. There are 3 stages: monitoring of the legislation, 550 regulations for the mining alone, producing new legislation, making new laws or amending the old ones. That's 4 to 5 years in my book. But what is most concerning? Well, business is admitted, so we have to bow to the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Justice, leading the process in question. There is this discussion. Discussion is good, but we are concerned with the position, or about the position of our European colleagues. The EU ambassador is very strict. The Brussels are very strict indeed. Dear Ukraine, the text, the EU law, it's take it or leave it. There are no talks. You think it's a negotiation. There are no negotiations. The EU law, you should just join it. That's it. And my concern is this. Our officials seem to be telling us that they cannot do anything about it. But this is not the way to go. We have the war. Unlike the EU, we have a totally different economic situation. Now we're in the talks on purchasing steel mills in Europe. Steel mills in Europe get grants to bring them into conformity with the EU law on environment, up to 1 billion euros per facility. We cannot possibly be in compliance or conformity with this. And this is something we are gonna stumble over in the talks, and we have to take heed of that, and the good one. Well, Ernst & Young, the colleague made an excellent presentation on the time for investors to get to the stage of cash. 18 years, he said. I think it's too much, but 5 to 7 years at least. And the best criterion to decide whether everything is good for the production in mining industries, the number of mines opened over the 20 years, lithium and so forth. But there are it's feasibility study. There are no mines, zero. I'll give you the number 0. Well, is it good? I'm in doubt. Another remark. Volodymyr. Angelica. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, when we started going along that chain from the permit to commissioning, it's 15-17 years. This is an established fact. There are different ways of mining. You can actually do mines, you can do pits, so you should not accept the average. But it's all on time. You should accept, one should accept. Thank you for the initiative, for the case to have this EIA, and then the investors should understand that they enter this with the EIA and the land plot attached. I'm not trying to generalize, I cannot, but we can first and should first issue this, the EAI. That's where we start. So thank you for the discussion. It's not usually the case for such events to provide a venue for discussion. Usually it's just doing one's number and then getting our coffee and leaving. Not in this case, thankfully. So I might trespass on your time unduly because I'm actually assigned to the second panel, but let's me mention something in connection with Angelica's sensitive presentation. Well, it's about subsoil use, but I'm also head of the environmental committee on subsoil use, so environmental conditions are within my concern. So Volodymyr Karaahmetoglu, First Deputy Minister. The Emerald network is not territories under conservation. These are protected reserves. These are the territories when you can operate, but such operations should fall under the plans for development of such territories. And what we insist upon and what the businesses insist upon, and I personally support that. This should be predictable for any territory. And if a person has this in its ownership or under one's management with the deposits of some minerals, they should immediately, and with the AIA and the land title, but they should understand what can be done and what cannot be done for many years to come in that territory. That's the difference. So we should not be afraid of this emerald notion as such. We should advocate for this very approach, the approach suggested in other jurisdictions, and it's in the legislation of this jurisdiction. Because, quite frankly, from time to time, and I agree there with Alexander with the was, we are actually undecided. We have some limits, then we remove the limits, and then again, without any kind of advocacy, we approach the EU. We should approach them, we should talk to them, we should come to terms with them, and that's, for us as the Parliament, we hope for the understanding with our interlocutors, because protection of environment, mining, waste management, industrial contamination and pollution, that's something to be discussed with the EU. And we would like to hear first inside the country, to talk to them using any kind of venue to discuss this with businesses, with the Parliament, and then we will have this reconciled position presented to our European partners, and we hope that that position will be defended with all the ministries acting on one front. This is not a coffee drinking opportunity, but may I still offer this coffee break, but we would like to make a family picture of the keynote speakers. So get closer. The coffee break is 15 minutes, and then you're expected to come back.